Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network.
Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa. Her mission to be onradio.com.
And welcome. My name is Dr. Marissa, and they do call me the kinder, gentler Dr. Laura, and you're listening to my weekly talk radio show called Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, a show about hope and happiness 88% of the time. So there's no gossip, no scandal, and no K-words. Kardashians. Exclusively on Universal Broadcasting Network, transmitting from the Sunset Gower Studios in Hollywood, California. And I'm here with my gorgeous station manager, Tony Sweet, and my new talented assistant, Sandy Manuel, on the soundboard. Yes. So I'm going to jump right in today with no preamble, because we have a record number of fabulous guests, and none of them are shy, including yours truly. So we're going to get right down to it. Today's question of the week is, what about Jerry Brown Cow? For those of you tuning in for the first time, here's a 2-minute recap. Last July, I started a special series called Healing from Past Abuse, and a new life balance coaching client, Chris Schrader, was courageous enough to come on the air and share his past pain of being sexually abused by an Episcopalian priest for 4 years as a teenager, and finally reaching a point of clarity that he was still suffering from that past pain and wanted to find hope and more happiness, bringing him to my doorstep. As part of his healing and to help him find his unique place on the planet with this horrific past was his active and very important role in helping pass the SB 131 bill through legislation. And thanks to his efforts and all of those on the call today, it did make it over several hoops to get onto the governor's desk. Unfortunately, Jerry vetoed the bill. So I asked all of my 6 guests on the air to answer the question of the week, what now, Jerry Brown Cow, to help us vent and release the negative energy, and thereby making room for positive, creative, strategic energy to figure out what to do next. So please welcome to the show in my studio here, Esther Hatfield Miller, and on the phone, Barbara Doris from SNAP, which is the support network for those abused by priests, Dr. Bob Geffner, who is the director of the IVAT Institute, which is the Institute of Violence, Abuse, and Trauma, Charmaine Carnes, who was on session 6 of Chris's session in healing, who was also abused by her gymnastics coach, and Tim Leedon, the author of the book, What Your Church Doesn't Want You to Know, and of course, Chris Schrader, who you all recognize and have been supporting. Thank you, listeners, for supporting Chris through all of his sessions. He will be going through session 7 this next Tuesday. But today I broke my rule. Normally you don't mix, I didn't want my show to be about politics and religion, but since it is about hope and happiness, there are times like this when certainly both have the ability to affect and increase or decrease our hope and happiness. So without further ado, and I believe we have everybody ready and waiting on the line, a big warm welcome to all of my guests in the studio. All right. And as I go through the questions today to make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in and also to talk, I'm going to ask all my callers to identify themselves and briefly introduce themselves. So we'll start with Dr. Geffner. Hello.
Hi. Hi. This is Bob Geffner. I'm the president of the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma at Alliant International University in San Diego. I'm a psychologist, among other things.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show, Dr. Geffner. And Barbara Doris.
I'm Barbara Doris. I'm the Victims Outreach Director for SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming on again. And Tim Leeden. Nope, Tim hasn't made it yet, but he will come. Charmaine.
I'm Charmaine Carnes, and I'm one of the advocates for SB 131.
Wonderful. And Charmaine, you were on session 6 for those of you who did not listen to that episode yet. It's a powerful episode. Thanks for joining us, Charmaine, again. And in my studio, I have another former guest, Esther Hatfield Miller.
Hi, Dr. Marissa. Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. And you are a volunteer from?
I am a volunteer with SNAP, and I still am a victims advocate and still do leafleting and very active. And I've moved into the online healing journals and modules of how to heal this pain we've all suffered.
And maybe just a little bit more background on you, because I think that you give a unique perspective because you were part of the bill that did get passed.
Yes, I was one of the recipients of the larger settlement in 2007 when I think there were over 500 of us litigants who settled for a massive settlement amount of $660 million, I believe, or billion. I don't know. I don't know how much it was.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. And that was holding the church responsible for the abuse?
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yes.
Okay, great. And last but not least, someone who I know quite well now, Chris Schrader. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Marissa.
I'm going
Thank
to
you.
kick this off by asking Chris what the SB 131 bill was.
When the bill was finally presented to the Assembly and passed on to the Senate for final reconciliation, the bill changed the statute of limitations. The age is 26 plus 5 years. It was 26 plus 3 years. And then it opened up a 1-year window beginning January 1st, 2014 for victims like me that had never been able to get restitution from the church, a 1-year window to bring action to the church. That's the way it ended up on Jerry Brown's bill, finalized, ready for him to either sign, or he didn't have to sign it. He just could have let it become law.
Mm-hmm. And I know that my listeners had actually along the way helped a lot by calling the assemblymen. Several assemblymen changed their vote, and we were able to sort of jump through some hoops. But I wanted Dr. Geffner, who's been involved with this bill more intimately, to sort of describe the process.
Someone has a radio on.
Yes, if I could have my callers turn their radio down so that we don't have the echo, that would be great. All right. Dr. Geffner?
Well, once you get somebody, a senator who drew the bill up, then it goes through committees. And then there's a lot of lobbying on a variety of sides, and then there's education. So the National Partnership to End Interpersonal Violence Across the Lifespan that I co-chair has also set up policies dealing with statute of limitations. So this information and others went into the various committees in the legislature as they're deciding to vote on it or not. In addition, those who really aren't too thrilled with this type of bill are lobbying against it. So most of the people who are trying to talk to the legislators and getting them to pass are people that, like the ones you have on the phone or in your studio, which are advocates or survivors or others. So not necessarily people with a lot of funding. However, the people who are lobbying against it, that wasn't their issue. They do have funding. In fact, from what I've been told, the Catholic Church and some others spent many bucks, in the millions of dollars, to actually send lobbyists to California legislature to lobby against it. Despite all the lobbying against it that went on for quite some time, over a few months, the committee passed it, then it goes to the actual legislature, and they did pass it. So that's the process it takes. You have to get not only a bill written, you have to get the bill through a committee, and then it has to go to the House and the Senate, and then it finally gets to the governor if it's passed. That process actually did occur, and the bill, as Chris mentioned, did move forward. And what it would have done is it would have opened, I think the key is the window that Chris mentioned. One of the things that happened from the lawsuit that I think Esther just mentioned is that it forced a lot of information to be released. And this is the same that we see in many of these large cases, whether you're talking about the Boy Scouts or the church or schools. The discovery produced a lot of information about other victims who may not have come forward, and some of whom may not have actually identified that all this was that had happened to them actually has affected their life. So the importance of this bill and why it started moving through this process was to allow people who did not realize originally and has been discovered since that there would have been an opportunity to get justice, to have their case heard and to move forward. And so that's what ended up going to the governor, and then the governor has to decide if they're, as Chris said, going to let it pass or sign. It's interesting, and I tend not to get involved in the political aspect either, especially as a nonprofit, and so we don't lobby, we just educate. But one of the things is, from my sources, is that the governor then has the opportunity to meet with different people and different organizations before he makes a decision. And my understanding is he met with very few, if any, of the survivors, victim advocates, and others who are in favor of this bill, and met more frequently and often with those who had opposed the bill.
So that's right there a bias.
You could argue that there appeared to be the bias. His reasoning for vetoing it, I think you're going to get to next.
Yes.
But
before you do that, I think I want Chris to read a letter that he actually sent in to the governor, sort of to, as you said, as a balanced governor, we would hope that he would have spent as much time with the pros and the not pros. So Chris did send this in, and I actually did call the governor's office myself, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Chris, read the letter that you sent, because I think it's a good...
It's hard for me to use this word. Honorable Governor Jerry Brown, my name is Chris Schrader. Attached is my letter of support for SB 131, Child Sex Abuse Statute of Limitations. I watched yesterday as you were addressed by local Southern California media about the bills that you were publicly supporting with no mention of SB 131. I agree with you about minimum wage increases. I watched one businessman slam you about giving society the opportunity to better their lives by raising their wages. I have also attached my personal story of a horrific crime perpetuated on me at the age of 12. After almost 20 years of silence, I stepped out of the dark and exposed the truth of what a trusted man did to me for almost 4 years. After another 20 years of never getting any justice for that crime, you now have a chance and the responsibility to change this statute. We gave up a lot to get this bill on your desk. I urge you to stand with the Senate and the Assembly of California and send the message of zero tolerance when it comes to the safety of our children, and to the perpetrators, we will not be silent no more. To organizations who continue to hide and deny that pedophiles exist by relocating or doing more to cover up this hideous event or events, by signing this bill, you support that California will not tolerate the abuse sexually whatsoever. As governor, you are sending a message to the United States of America to stop this ever-growing abuse. Do not come to California. Governor, I stand before you today, silent no more.
Okay, powerful. Thank you.
Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, and when I called and I talked to the aide Oscar, and at that point I had actually been told that it was very likely that he would let it pass by not publicly supporting, but just not doing anything. So I was actually in a very jovial mood when I talked to Oscar. I invited the governor on the air. Now I understand why he didn't come on the air.
Totally.
And I was shocked when I was told, when Chris let me know, and Esther as well. So, and again, this next question is, why do you think Jerry Brown vetoed the bill? And there's no one answer here. I want to, as the balance facilitator, remembering that it's a systemic issue. And I don't necessarily want to bash the governor, but I do want us to learn from this, because when we go forward, these are the bases we need to cover. So I'd like, Barbara, if you could start, why you think, in your experience, and you've been in this field for quite a long time, what's interesting about Barbara and her story is that she herself watched children being abused sexually and went and tried to make a difference and get things changed, and was not effective in a church school. So her background is intimate. And as the director at SNAP, I believe that's your title now, co-director at SNAP, what do you think happened? Why do you think Governor Brown vetoed the bill?
It's very difficult to tell. I mean, we have seen this happen in other states where we would walk into, the legislators knowing we had the votes, and it would come apart at the last minute. I think we underestimate the power the church holds and its ability to influence politics. Mm-hmm. I think that the bishops can choose to use their power, and I know this is going to sound like a cartoon, for good or for evil. Mm-hmm. And they chose to use it for evil. And that they had the political power and chose to stop this because it would expose how much they've known, how little they've done to protect the children. And rather than allow that to happen, they've used every ounce of influence they've got to stop legislation from exposing their dirty secrets.
It doesn't make sense. Esther, what's your reaction?
Well, one nuance of SB 131 was that it did not include public institutions. And I believe that when this one-year statute of limitations was applied for when I was able to benefit from that, it did include public institutions. So I think that's one of the slight nuances. This was just for private institutions. And I think that gave him the channel with which to craft a justification.
Yeah, because one of the things he said is, if this is valid, it should be valid for everyone.
Correct.
Right. Now, Charmaine, it's interesting. When I spoke to you, I had the feeling, because I'm going to blame it on Chris, because he had the feeling that this was pretty much going to be a no-brainer. But you, Charmaine, actually said, I don't know, you had a feeling or something that this was going to happen.
Yes.
So why? Where'd your feeling come from?
Well, I'm a product of the Catholic school system, and had been from kindergarten through high school, so far as to have gone, into a convent style through high school. And they have an incredible amount of power, and they can take something that would be a small little window, like the public-private issue that was discussed in SB 131, and expose it in such a fashion as to make it seem like the bill was unfair and it wasn't written well because it didn't include the public institutions, even though, the counterbalance to that is that public institutions have mandatory reporting, whereas private institutions don't. And so,
So it was
Governor Brown.
It was a ruse. Excuse me, Charmaine, for interrupting, but that comment that he made about the Miramontes and Sandusky, Penn State, was just a ruse. So go on.
Well, the sad thing is that SB 131 would have opened an opportunity to allow children now from not being hurt, because more predators from the Catholic Church, from the Boy Scouts, from other private institutions that are probably, as we speak, continuing to victimize children, would have been held accountable for their actions from other people who would have used the window to expose them. And so, Honorable Brown went ahead and actually did damage to children right now, in my opinion, by not signing this bill. And he could have just chosen to stay silent and allow the bill to pass. And instead, I believe he's going to run again. I believe that everybody thinks it's going to be a landslide victory for him. And we're going to be up against another round of this. But as we must move forward as a state by continuing to work with the statute of limitations and hopefully getting it to a point of elimination, public and private, we can take what we've learned from SB 131 and focus that on a new bill that would leave not a speck, not window at all for opportunists to come in and sway the governor to make a decision that is not in the best interest of our children.
Yes, well said. Thank you, Charmaine. Dr. Geffner.
I think there's two essentially straw person arguments here that's sort of a shame and that the future will need to counter. And I think Chris sort of alluded to one, which is that, this is only focused on public institutions, so it's not fair. When you think about that and the logic of that, it sort of falls apart because, okay, so if you know predators in one place and they might be in the other, we're not going to eliminate the first place because we haven't eliminated the second place.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
It makes more sense. Yeah, it makes more sense to say, okay, so we're now focused on private institutions, not just the church, but others. And at some point, we have to come back and focus on public. I mean, the state has no money and public institutions don't have money.
Right.
But that's really a straw person argument saying it's not fair because, it's really absurd to say, okay, well, we're not going to go after the predators that we know are there because it's not fair.
Right.
So that was one. I think the other one that is a straw person argument, which I really sort of suspected and laughed at the same time because, again, it's so absurd, is the whole funding issue. Because the other comment was, well, churches and other have already paid out so much money, we don't need to penalize them more. And you think about that, if there are more victims out there, and which we know there are, and more survivors and more of this happening, then you mean all of a sudden there's a cap on how much money is okay to do it, and then we don't have to do anything after that? See, to me, that's an absurd comment because if there's still people out there who need to be to go through the justice system and to be able to get their justice, then the money is not the question. And if there are no more, then we don't have to worry about there being any more money that's going to be paid out. So that's, again, one of these catch-22 types of arguments that, to me, is really absurd when you think it through. And I think, unfortunately, not enough people have really thought those through to start really countering it. And I think that's what's going to need to happen the next time around, whenever or wherever that might be, is to get a lot more I think media attention
Yeah,
and advocacy
let me
survivors.
ask about that. Why it wasn't there more reaction to his veto? Like, why didn't the
Because
news?
they-
Well,
pick
because
that
he
up?
did it at 2:00. He did it on a Saturday afternoon when the government was in the middle of a shutdown. There was college football games going on. The baseball playoffs were going on, and he waited. I had that gut feeling on Friday afternoon. I told you about that, and Charmaine and I talked about this, that he was going to do it in the dark of the night when no one was paying attention, and he waited till that last hour, and so. But during the process,
It was a strategic move
it was a
to try to
strategic.
not draw attention from the media.
It was.
And it's continued to be a strategic move to not draw attention to the media or for the media to take hold of this. And I believe that there are institutions out there that are working to make sure this stays in the shadows.
Yeah, and here's one of those semantic points, and I think that to put the moose on the table, as I say, because I'm from Canada, we don't talk about the elephant in the room. We talk about the moose on the table. Is in even having Chris on do his healing live and talking about abuse, and nobody wants to talk about abuse, especially sexual abuse, and then on top of that, sexual abuse in the church. The discomfort, the palpable discomfort, whether you're in it, of it, or around it, the only way, and I look at, Chris just showed me the reaction of one of the archbishops saying, the Catholic Church has already paid enough, or we're already doing enough. We're training people for safe environment. The reality is, the reason why the money is important is when there is money penalized, or when there is a lot of money that it makes a difference, then behavior changes. If we look at sexual harassment in the workplace, it wasn't until there was some serious dollars put behind the accusation or awarded to those who made the accusation, was there change, so that women could walk, by their boss and not get slapped in the butt. So on one hand, people who aren't comfortable with talking about paying for their crimes, or paying for, or bringing into the light things that are in the dark, it has to happen. We have to get to a point where we talk about this and get past our discomfort, not to necessarily wag our fingers and say, how could you, or you need to stop, but really make a statement. And that's the part where I don't understand how this could have happened. I guess for me, the way that even, because I brought this up to my media outlets, and nobody wants to touch it. It's really, it's kind of amazing that is true in this, and I understand it semantically, and I understand it emotionally, but we really do, and that's why I call everybody on the call and in the studio part of the Light Brigade, because we do have to do this. And the good news is that, as Charmaine said, there is a next time. We can do something differently. So the strategic part of this session, or this episode, is, and we're going to take a little break right now, but when we come back, I do want to focus on what can we now do? What can we do as a result of this that will make the light shine better? So there's the sound.
Hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate, to live, love, laugh, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Fay on ubnradio.com.
And welcome back. If you just joined us, you are listening to Take My Advice and I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, a show about hope and happiness 88% of the time. And today's episode is centered around the question of the week, what now, Jerry Brown cow? And it's a reaction to his veto of SB 131, a legislation that all of my listeners have been wonderful in supporting, both in contacting their assemblymen and having them change their votes so that they got it to the governor's desk, and unfortunately he did not see the light and vetoed it. So now we are at a point where we're asking, what do we do next? So there's two
Dr.
things.
Marissa, if you don't mind me chiming in on that,
Sure.
on what we would do next, I just want to say off the bat, because as we went to break, you had mentioned the sponsor of our break was the 12-step program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that this next time around we get powerful organizations like the 12-step program that is has no reason to have any bias or anything of their own agenda to help sponsor this cause and use their power, and their influence and their ability to help get to the media, because some of them were victims themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You find that in that 12-step program, a lot of times why people would turn to drinking or drugs is because they were dealing with issues from their youth and
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. So if we can educate some of the bigger powerhouse nonprofits out there to join our cause
Mm-hmm.
and bring in the media through that window,
Mm-hmm.
that's one way,
Mm-hmm.
I think, that we could start the ball rolling.
Right. Dr. Geffner, is IVAT, is it the central hub for this? Is there a central hub for this?
Well, I don't know if there's a central hub, but one of the things we've been doing as part of the whole national partnership is dealing with statute of limitations because of how it really ties into the whole effort to eliminate interpersonal violence. The other thing that that I think is not being portrayed enough, and that's where hopefully we can get more media attention, is what happened in the prior lawsuits is, in addition to the money and holding certain people accountable to make sure they and others aren't allowed to keep doing this in secret, is the discovery part. I mean, people had no idea whether we're talking about Sandusky or we're talking about Boy Scouts or we're talking about the Catholic Church or other churches, how extensive this abuse was for so many decades.
Mm-hmm.
And how many victims and perpetrators were out there.
Right.
And I think what was really important in the media part of this was that education, that this is not one or two people.
Right.
These are hundreds and hundreds of people who have gone through their life without realizing how severely they were traumatized and affected, and how they never made that connection. And those people are still out there.
Right.
There are still millions of people who are survivors who really haven't been activated both from an advocate position or even their own knowledge to be able to, as your show is talking about, change their life around.
Right.
And that's what this is all about.
Right.
Is,
You mentioned...
is really,
Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it's bringing this out in the open so people can heal and so people can move forward and we start really having an impact. The media really have to be drawn into this, just like they were with the LA case on the Catholic Church, just the way they were with Sandusky. We finally started moving in a more positive direction with media attention and not blaming the victim or denial.
Right.
And I think all the advocacy groups who can lobby really need to do that. Our job as a nonprofit is to provide the education, provide the research, provide the information to get that out to the media and to the public so that they can really mount an effort to say, this is not acceptable. Vetoing this bill or a similar bill is no longer acceptable in this era of, moving things forward and really protecting our children and helping survivors who are all over the place recover and heal.
And just to agree with you on that, and you had mentioned that on the last time you were on my show, Dr. Geffner, is it's bad enough that the abuse happened, and then to have a non-acknowledgement in this public forum is so damaging and so painful. And one of the problems with this is that people don't want to come forward for that very reason. It was bad enough that it happened, and then to come out and not be supported. So to have some kind of public statement, and I'm sure, Barbara, you from SNAP have already reacted to the veto, that there is, I don't know how to do that, to have a central way so that it's not fractionated, so that we're not reacting kind of all over the place, but there is a systemic educational reaction to this that is funneled in one place into the media, so that it's stronger. And that I agree with you, to Charmaine, to have that kind of momentum from various groups. Now, I think we have Tim Leeden on the line now. Tim, welcome.
I'm very sorry. Just briefly, I'm just going to address the question that I had, and the question is basically, why was this vetoed? And I think the answer is very simple. Jerry Brown is a Catholic. This is a Catholic veto. And people that don't look at the Catholic Church as a military operation are missing the point. The marching orders for something like this come from outside. And basically, I think the Catholic Church looked at this action, and they could not afford a bill like this in the largest state in the Union, because suddenly this challenge is going to come up all around the country. And the only defense that the Catholic Church had during all those information that I got from Chris and SNAP, etc., was, this is too expensive. We cannot afford this. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Catholic Church looked at. We cannot afford financially, after all the dioceses that have declared bankruptcy over the last 5 or 6 years, mm-hmm. They couldn't afford it. And so someone, or the Catholic lobby leaned on the governor as a Catholic, saying, you have to veto this. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I think it's... and all the efforts that everyone is making are very, very commendable. Mm-hmm. But until we look at that, and that there's some enlightened leadership in the Catholic Church, uh-huh. because these kids, a lot of these kids that are molested are Catholic. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I don't understand about parents in the Catholic Church. These are your children. Mm-hmm. And they have to look at Governor Brown as a fellow Catholic, and he made a Catholic veto, mm-hmm. period.
Right.
Don't you think we could once again, though, fight that argument by saying that by passing a bill and by, eliminating the statute, we would, in the long run, as the Catholic Church, as a business, be saving money, because eliminating the problem mm-hmm. then eliminates the future issues of the way that the bill is written now.
Yeah.
No,
so
I
the
agree.
26-year-olds out there, would not need to be out there if we were able to. So if we look at it from a mathematical and business approach, we mm-hmm. could say, hey, look, this is actually going to save you money in the long run.
Right, and that's a good part of the education.
I don't know that we should make it about money, because they paid out $660 million without selling a building. I believe it's more about keeping their secrets, keeping control, and about the power they can wield.
Right.
And I think we have to consider, that if they can do that amount of money without blinking an eye, without losing, quote, anything,
right.
that we have to find another way to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. I think it's multiple.
Money
Barbara.
is definitely a part of it.
I think it's multiple.
But it can't be the only
right.
part.
But and I don't think Tim is saying that that's the truth. That's their defense. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily
absolutely.
Because I absolutely agree with you. I actually talked to an Episcopalian priest that I met And I was kind of like, she was asking what my show was about, and I was a little afraid to say, well, guess what? I'm working with someone who got abused by an Episcopalian. And I told her, and you know what her reaction was? The first thing out of her mouth is, they have a lot of money. That was her first reaction. I was like,
is that right?
Oh my God, that's great, because she got it. She got that if someone's going to do that, there has to be a message that is not tolerated, and even though it's not about money, that does make a difference. Now,
so they're definitely using their money to make sure that it's not getting
lobbying,
out to the media,
yes.
and it's not being. They spent a lot of money to ensure that this stays silent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
the money's
now,
there.
So now let's make sure we have a clear pathway. So this bill is dead. There's nothing we can do about this bill. There's two prongs of action that I see. One is this is still pretty fresh. So there can be a very concise educational piece as the consequence of the governor vetoing this bill. This is what it does. It encourages those who are still perpetrating that there is no consequence. It encourages organizations to continue to harbor people who are molesting or hurting our children. So there's a concise consequence of his doing this, and I'm saying this because there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of pain. And if we can funnel that into a logical, rational business, as you were saying, Charmaine, follow through on one end in the reaction, that then fuels the next bill. And the next bill addresses all of those points that they put down here around you haven't spent enough money, and it is good that you're educating, but that doesn't send the message enough if people are not held accountable for what they have done in their past.
But what Jerry Brown did is, number one, the reason that the public was not put in this bill is because the public unions would have killed the bill before it got out of committee. Because, as Charmaine said, a public institution is governed by state laws that they can only release a certain amount of confidential information. So what the governor did was he towed the party line of the opposite party, and their argument that the public schools were not and public institutions were not added into the bill, which would have killed the bill in the very beginning. It would have never gotten on his desk. So that argument from him, it holds no water. He basically what he did on that Saturday, October 12th, was he wrote a blank check to all the pedophiles around the world that you can get away with what you've been doing. And he cites Roman law back to 1623 about statute of limitations, and that it is okay for what you did in the past, that you don't have to be held accountable for what you did, and what you're doing now you're never going to be held accountable for because it's going to be considered in the past. So Governor Brown just wrote a blank check to every pedophile in the world that you can get away with this forever, and we're never going to do anything about it. And him being a Catholic, he should have recused himself from any decision about this bill.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that we haven't really focused on are the issues of media fatigue. Mm-hmm. After 2007, from 2002 to 2007, there was a lot of buzz. Mm-hmm. After 2007, people are said, okay, you guys got your money, so go away, move on. Really, move on. These are children's soul. This is soul murder. Mm-hmm. These are children's souls that are being murdered. Mm-hmm. This was not about money for us. This was about us being able to have a platform with which to tell our stories so that we can say this systemic problem is replicating itself over and over and over. Just last week, I fielded on Thursday, another new victim came forward. This is not done with, right? Okay,
As
so
for-
we can also utilize social media. We could get crafty instead of, because the media fatigue, it's such a deep, dark, horrific topic to talk about. But we could do a compare and contrast in funny videos or clever videos, use social media to increase awareness, okay? We can't beat them at their game like this politically, but we can beat them by educating and bringing awareness. You know, many of us victims weren't even awake. For 27 years, I was silent. Chris, I don't know how many years have you been silent? You know, okay, we were just dead, walking dead. So in the awakening, then we can teach about awareness. It's really powerful, and then we can also highlight, where are these 550 litigants now? Okay, so the money, we know the money didn't fix it, because some have offed themselves, some have committed suicide, and some of us are thriving.
Right.
Okay.
So, and I know, Barbara, your organization alone has thousands. So, Robert, you earlier said hundreds. This happens to hundreds of people. This happens to thousands of people. And I know SNAP is one of those areas. And I'm going to put Barbara on the spot and Bob on the spot. I think that if there's a task force going forward to address this exact thing, what should the education be? What should, the content of the process of it? That this group that I have here in the Light Brigade is a great, hub. That hub that I'm looking for, I think you guys are it. So, and unfortunately, we're butting at the end of the time, but I wanted to thank so much Dr. Bob Geffner from IVAT, Barbara Doris from SNAP, Tim Leeden, who I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to speak more, but thank you for coming on here, Charmaine Carnes, Esther Hatfield Miller, and Chris Schrader for being here.
Can I say one thing? I have one thing I want to say, that on Saturday after Esther called me and I hung up the phone, I felt as though I had just been molested one more time. That what stopped 42 years ago just happened one more time on that day when Jerry Brown made this decision, that the molestation happened again.
And there is healing. We can go forward. We can move on.
And to answer your other question before you end, Marissa, is for those in, as you call them, Light Brigade, who wants to get involved, we do have a committee of the National Partnership from our policy action team who are working specifically on statute of limitations issues with others around the country. And any on the phone or in your studio or who are listening to this, if they get in touch with us here at IVAT, we can get them involved with that group.
So I'm going to make you the hub, Dr. Geffner.
I volunteer. I absolutely volunteer.
And Esther volunteers also to be a light holder. So how do we get a hold of you, Esther? Or both?
Well, for me, if you send an email to IVAT, IV as in Victor, AT as in Tom, Centers, all one word, IVAT Centers at Alliant, ALLIANT.edu, and it'll get routed if they just put policy action team of the National Partnership, and it'll get routed to the right people who will follow up.
That'd be great. And then Esther?
Well, I must say, I'm sorry to interrupt, Esther. I just want to say that I personally, in my involvement, would always be willing to put a face and a name to a crime. And I think that the public and the media need to have that personal story.
Right.
And I know that that's one thing I can provide.
Great, Charmaine. Thank you.
And I need to correct. I gave you my website and email at the same time and confuse them. It's just IVAT at Alliant.edu.
Okay, IVAT at Alliant. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. And very quickly, Esther.
Esther Hatfield at yahoo.com.
Esther Hatfield at yahoo.com. So we have a strategy, we have people, we have the energy, and we have the love that we know we need to put light into the darkness. As Martin Luther King says, you cannot rid darkness with darkness. You can only rid darkness with light. So Thank you so much. And next week, we're going to continue with Chris's life balance coaching session, number 7, to work on his process of finding smart ways of channeling his anger and disappointment. So if you know of anyone who's in a similar situation, please tune in to WWUBN Radio next Tuesday. And thank you once again. One last big round of applause for all of my guests. Thank you so much for coming here and to sharing and just some great, fantastic stuff. So next Tuesday, tune in for Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa Pay. That's P for positive, EI. And remember, it's all about balance. Peace in and peace out.
You broke my heart, 'cause I couldn't dance.